Okay. What is your name?
My name is Burnetta Turner Wheaton, Johnson Wheaton. So
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in rural Mississippi, Columbia. I was born in Columbia, Mississippi, November the 6th, 1943. And I saw the house where I was born. It was in a little town. Later we moved out further into the rural area. But my happiest, most memorable times is growing up as a child in rural Mississippi. I picked cotton, picked corn, did everything to do on the farm. And now those are some of the happiest days of my memory.
What made it happy?
Well, I think about the love and the nourishment that I got. I had a aunt. My mother died when I was a year old, before I made 2. So I never knew my mother, but I had an aunt, my mother's sister. And I didn't live with her all the time, but I would live with her from time to time. I lived with older siblings and with different people as I grew up. But the last 3 years of my high school, I lived in Columbia with this aunt, 10th, 11th, and 12th, and I graduated from high school in Columbia, Mississippi. But I did go to school in other places, in New Orleans and in DeRidder, Louisiana, where I lived with my sister.
Okay. And what was your family like growing up?
Well, I am the 10th child of 11 children by my mother. When my mother died, my youngest sibling, my brother was 3 months old. I was a year in almost not 2, but I was a year maybe 10, 11 months. And I never lived, I don't remember living with all of my siblings in the household at one time, because from the time I can remember, I wasn't, we weren't all together. After mother died, some of my siblings stayed in different places with different relatives. Sometimes we would be with our father, sometimes we would be other places. But at different times I lived with some of my older siblings. My older sister, I lived with her, and she and I was very close.
And tell us a little bit about your father.
Well, my father well, I guess you would call him kind of a businessman. He did a lot of different things. I remember him running a club a few times, and he worked on the riverfront in New Orleans from time to time, and as he got older, then he didn't work anymore. But my father was, one thing my father instilled in me was to work hard. And not only to work hard, but the work that I did, whatever I do, to do it the best, because if I didn't do it correctly, I would have to do it over. So he taught me to be very thorough in my doing. And he felt like you should keep busy. He didn't feel that it was good for you just to sit around and do nothing. So now I still feel like sometimes I need to do something all the time.
And what about your sister?
Well, I still have 2 living sisters. I have 2 sisters who's deceased. My oldest sister, she's been dead now, I guess about 5 years or so. But she was very sweet and loving. And I think she had, she was another person I think I kind of, unofficially looked to as my mother. She was about 15 years maybe older than me. But she was very loving and kind, and she was just a very sweet person, and I admire her. And I have 2 sisters that are living. They are both older than I am, but I respect them and admire them.
Oh, any brothers?
Yes, I have right now. I have 2 living brothers. My youngest brother, who's a year and 7 months younger than me. Live in Georgia. My oldest living brother live in Harvey. He's 87 now, and I'll be making 77, so he's like 10 years older. But my brothers were all hard workers, they began in New Orleans. Three of my brothers at different times, they had businesses and mechanic shops and service station, and you know, they went into business. I learned how hard it was sometimes for us to go into business. They worked very hard. My brother now, that's 87, I call him and check on him and say, "What you doing?" He said, "Nothing, just resting." I said, "It's time for you to rest because you worked hard all your life." But they were all very hard workers.
So after you left Mississippi, where did you go? After you left your hometown?
Yeah, when I left Mississippi, after I graduated from high school, I moved back to New Orleans for a short time, and then I came to Slidell to help my sister, who is the mother of 7 children. She had 7 children, and the oldest child was 7 or 8. So I said, I think she needed a little help, so I came to try to help her because she was working 2 or 3 jobs. And while I was here, I met my first husband, and we got married. So now I've lived in Slidell now for 57 years.
What was your first husband like?
He was, his name was Rogers Johnson, and he was very nice, very kind. I thought he promised, he seemed to be the person I thought that he worked in the church. He went to church, and I thought anybody that go to church, if you were a member of the church and worked in church, well, you were basically a very good person, and you were kind and loving. And he was, after we got married, but then after we married a while, I found out that everybody that go to church is not everything you think they are, or they should be. So, and I don't mean to pass judgment on him, but he was a kind person, and he, you know, we had some good, we were married for 17 years. Maybe more than 17, but we separated after 17 years. And later we divorced and he remarried. But we had some good, we were able to establish, you know, we had 3 children, and we bought a home, the home that I still live in. And we remained, after we separated, we still remained friends. And he got down sick. When he got down sick, I would go and try to do what I could do for him. And, you know, so we were friends up until he died.
And what about your 3 children with him?
Well, 2 of my children, my oldest son, he's a minister and work as accounting for his church in Dallas, Chase Oak Church. And he has a set of twins, so this is their first year in college. And my 2 youngest children, I had 1 daughter, and she lived till she was 28. She had a heart defect, but she finished college, and she was an occupational therapist. And my youngest son, Eric, he's lived here in Slidell. He got drowned 10 years ago in 2010. So now I just have my oldest son that lives in Dallas.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I deal with it the best I can. There are times when I think of them a lot, most days, but I thank God that I had them. My daughter and I, being the only girl, we had a very close relationship. We spent time together as much as we could. She went when she was in college or whatever, but we spent holidays and special times. She made sure that she was with me. And she took ill. She had moved to Florida, and her intention was to move me to Florida because she loved Florida. She wanted me to be with her wherever she was. But her heart began to get bad, and she had had open heart surgery, and all of her surgeries was done at Archner Hospital in New Orleans. So she and the doctor thought that it would be best if she would be close to Archner. So she moved back home, and then she got an apartment over in New Orleans out in the east. And she was there, I don't know if it was a year or whatever, and she was working at a nursing facility out in the east, and she took ill, went to the hospital on Friday. And I went over, and she died before day that Sunday morning. But we had a good relationship, and her last words that she told me, "Mama, thank you. You've always been there for me." And I said, "Thank you, because you've always been a good daughter for me." But I have a lot of good memories. I thank God for the memories that I have of her.
Why is God important?
Well, with my aunt that I lived with was very, very involved in the church, and I began going to church at a very young age. And I was taught, and then as I got older, I was taught that who we are and all of our being has to do with His grace, and what He has blessed us with our lives. And even with the hardships, we learn from it and we grow. When I was a very young child, I remember hearing this sermon, and I still remember it, but it was saying that we do what we can do. God do so much, but we do what we can do. And it was an illustration was about two animals fell in a hole, and one of them was trying to get out, and they would jump, and they would say, "Oh, God help, God help," and the other one trying to get out, but he would jump and he would say, "Lord help, and I'll help." Well, the first one, he just stopped and sit down, said, help Lord," and the other, "Lord help, and I'll help." But the one that said, "Lord help, and I'll help," each time he jumped, and eventually he was able to get out and go on. But the one that just sit there and said, "Help, help, help," he ended up dying in the hole. And I learned from that I have to do what I can do for myself, and God will help me. And when I was a child, when I would get in a certain crisis, I would just say, "Lord help, and I'll help." That would be my prayer, because that, and thank God He would understand. And that taught me now that I pray and ask God to do, but I also do as much as I can do for myself.